The year-long war in the Middle East has now entered a crucial and decisive phase, which is also a very dangerous phase that could lead to uncontrolled accidental escalation. An escalation that nobody needs and nobody wants, but yet it might happen. So let's take a look at what has been happening so far. It has been standard Israeli policy that whenever it gets into a conflict with multiple antagonists, it tries to take them on one by one and not all together. It prioritizes and then shifts from one target to the other to the other. That is exactly what had happened in 1967, that had happened in 1963 and subsequently. So in this case, when Israel was struck on 7th of October by brutal attack by the Hamas and taken totally by surprise, 1,200 Israeli citizens, including women, were raped, killed, children were also, babies were murdered, and about 250 plus hostages taken from the Israeli border areas. Israel, as we all know, struck back viciously. Successively, it started an air campaign, went into a ground campaign, north to south. It kept on driving the Gaza population of Palestinian Arabs into one set of refugee camps, then the second, then the third, while their infrastructure was entirely destroyed. And in the attempt to root out the Hamas, Israel launched a brutal and crackdown, but its outrage, I suppose, was justified. People had asked for it, and they got it in full measure. An orchestrated media campaign was created all over the world, especially in the West, to try and show Israel as using disproportionate force, brutal, attacking civilian targets, punishing whole populations, etc. But Israel was not deterred, Israel was not shaken. It has with determination continued to do what it thought was necessary to protect its citizens, and in the bargain the Hamas has been pulverized. It has been more or less reduced to impotence, and initially the Hamas leadership had all gone underground into the tunnel network, but as they started emerging, when they thought that the war was over, they were struck by the Israeli Air Force and whenever required by Israeli ground strikes. So Hamas has more or less, it looks like, been beaten into submission. Whether a peace deal will come through there, the hostages, that issue seems to have receded into the background, especially the American hostages. But the simple fact is that Israel has now pivoted to its northern border, to the border with Lebanon, where the Hezbollah has been waging a campaign of attrition since 8th of October, the very next day that Hamas had struck. It has been firing anti-tank guided missiles from buildings along the border, in the border belt. These are missiles of 7 to 10 kilometers range, very precise. It has been hitting targets with accuracy on the Israeli side, and it has been firing Katyusha rockets, unguided rockets, and to that extent Israel was forced to withdraw about 60 to 70,000 of its citizens from northern Israel. Now, quite obviously, this cannot go on indefinitely. These people have to return to their homes and hearths. They can't live out of suitcases forever. They were manning industries, they were running corporate enterprises in northern Israel. So the Israeli economy cannot afford a prolonged absence of these people from their homes and hearths. So, to my mind, Israel had no military option but to try and sanitize its northern border and repatriate its 60 to 70,000 people who have been displaced, made refugees in their own country. Israel had no other option. Now the Hezbollah is a far tougher entity than the Hamas, a far more formidable force than the Hamas ever was. It has about 150, some experts claim 200,000 rockets, missiles, cruise missiles, etc. Unguided rockets, precision guided missiles. It has a huge arsenal of 150 to 200,000. Now, besides that, it has a ground force which is very tough, and in the previous wars with Israel in 1982, in 2006, they had proven to be formidable fighters and tenacious fighters who had used a combination of technology and stealth and caused heavy losses to the Israeli armies, heavy attrition on the Israeli attacking forces. They were subdued enough because of the scale of destruction caused by Israeli air power, their Merkava tanks, their artillery. They had taken a pounding, and therefore they were not too keen to fight again. That's also a fact. They have not been too keen to incite Israel beyond a point. So far they tried to keep it within the tolerance thresholds. But then came the killing of Haniyeh in Iran. And now Iran was on a Hobson's choice whether it should attack, repeat the April 2024 strikes on Israel, where it had fired about 300 plus drones and missiles at Israel, and though most of them, 90% plus, were intercepted, some did get through, and some of the larger, heavier rockets did get through on the Ramon air base, the Rafale air base, and also their 8022 intelligence gathering facility on the Golan Heights. So was Israel looking for an opportunity to provoke Iran into such a war and try and take out its nascent nuclear facility? The simple fact is there is a new president in Iran who's a moderate, who's eased up on the hijabs for women and things like that, and he is not at all keen. He is more keen to try and get into a period of peace so that Iran can progress economically and not give an excuse to the Israelis and the Americans to inflict horrific damage on Iran. It is a fact that Iran can also cause terrible level of damage if it is pushed into a war. It is bound to lose, but before going down, it can create massive problems, not just for Israel and the United States and the Middle Eastern region, but for the whole globe by escalating, pushing up the prices of oil, etc. So Iran decided not to respond itself, but it asked the Hezbollah to respond on its behalf. That ring of fire that it has put around Iran of Shiite militias in the Hezbollah, in Hamas, in the Houthis in Yemen, in the Shiite militias in Syria and Iraq, this ring of fire around Israel, it tried to activate that and not respond directly, fearing the consequences to Iran's economy per se. Now, Israel from the very outset, it is my analysis, was very clear that it would deal with the Hamas first, and then it would shift the center of gravity of operations to the Lebanon border, and that is precisely what has happened. Even months earlier, Israeli armored forces had started concentrating on the Lebanon border in northern Israel, in the borders with the Hezbollah. Initially, Israel used its air power and intelligence capabilities to firstly destroy the entire infrastructure in the border zone up to 6 to 10 kilometers from where the Hezbollah were firing anti-tank guided missiles from multi-story building complexes to get enhanced range into Israel. They destroyed it to rubble. It has been destroyed. But the Hezbollah quickly adjusted and they started firing Katyusha rockets. They were careful not to escalate to a degree that would invite a devastating Israeli response. But the fact is that they continued to fire Katyusha rockets, unguided rockets into Israel. Most of these were intercepted by the air-dome defense system, but they were able to cause adequate pressure to ensure that none of the population which had been evacuated from northern Israel could go back and continue their lives as heretofore. So, in the month of September, Israel was very clear that it would have to escalate to de-escalate. Mark my words, it would have to escalate to de-escalate, and it initially decided that it would go in for a combination of intelligence operations and heavy airstrikes, massive airstrikes to coerce the Hezbollah, to put adequate pressure on Hezbollah to either go in for a ceasefire or to go in for a pullback of its forces from the Lebanon border. Don't forget that as per the 2006 what had been agreed to, it was supposed to stay clear of the border belt from Israel, but it had slowly crept back, right back to the border, and now Israel's only hope of securing a level of security for its citizens in northern Israel is to see that they are pushed back. They have tried this pushing back. 1982 also they had pushed them back beyond the Litani river. But like I said, it had come at a huge cost. Israel is also hesitant to pay that major cost. It is also not very keen on a escalation into a all-out war here, into a ground offensive here, because that could at a stage involve Iran, and neither the United States nor Israel nor the rest of the world seems very keen for that kind of an Armageddon right now in the Middle East. So it decided to go in for a combination of lethal air power, air strikes and intelligence operation. 17th of September, Israel struck. Despite the United States, advising Israel not to escalate, not to widen this conflict, not to escalate to a level that Hezbollah or Iran would get involved, Israel stood firm. The chief of the American Central Command was sent again to hold confabulations, and they convinced the Americans that they had no choice. They have no choice. If 60 to 70,000 Israeli evacuees have to go back to northern Israel, Israel had to respond, and strongly it had to escalate to de-escalate. So, like I said, on 17th of September, Israel struck with an intelligence operation of staggering magnitude, because it's been done the first time in the world, and it shows the Israeli ingenuity to come up with ever newer ideas of taking the war to the enemy. There was an Israeli shell company in Hungary which had purchased pagers and walkie-talkies from a company in Taiwan, and the shell company was used to pass on these pagers and walkie-talkies to the Hezbollah in Lebanon. This company was owned by an Israeli. I think it is amazing that at least this kind of a check the Hezbollah would have done before purchasing those walkie-talkies and those pagers. But Israel struck on 17th, it hit about 3,000 pagers. There were about 35 killed, 3,000 wounded. People lost their eyes, people lost their lower limbs, and there were hostile combat. And Israel, the claims in Israel and in the Western press media was that Israel had decapacitated the command and control network of the Hezbollah just prior to their launching any major strikes, because they could. The Israeli intelligence was very clear that Hezbollah was now under pressure from Iran, going to try and take the revenge of Haniyeh, etc., and they were going to strike back with their rockets and missiles, etc. And therefore, to preempt, Israel had launched this operation on 17th of September itself, when they used the pagers, and caused severe casualties. And 18th they hit the walkie-talkies. I mean, explosions all over in walkie-talkies, and like I said, overall 17th, 18th September, about 35 killed and 3,000 casualties inflicted on the Hezbollah. And Israel claimed that it was the critical leadership component, it was the command and control component which has been hit. Now, Alistair Croquet, one of the leading military experts of the Middle East region, he has stated that from 2006 and even before that, the main command and control network of the Hezbollah, they had shifted to underground fiber optic cables. And as such, Alan feels that this strike on the command and control network, as claimed, hit only the civilian part of the Hezbollah. You know, their police operatives, police commanders, local law and order agencies, they have been hit. And Alan, Croquet feels that the main command and control element of the Hezbollah has not really been taken out. Yes, individual targets have been taken out by airstrikes, but in this intelligence operation, they were not taken out. It is the second tier, third tier command and control network that was hit. But whatever it is, it caused severe demoralization in the Hezbollah rank. It shook them up for a minute as to what exactly was going on. It achieved surprise. This was a one-time use tactic. You can't use it again and again, because quite obviously the day the explosions of the lithium-ion batteries go off in the pagers, go off in the walkie-talkies, but that's the end of use of these. People will throw them aside and not use them any longer. These were, but as Alan says, these were not crucial command and control network, right? This is not crucial command and control network, and therefore they feel that the Hezbollah command and control is largely intact. Now, the Israelis switch to the second phase, and that is from 19th September to 24th September. The Israeli Air Force launched a massive series of strikes over an area of 1,700 square kilometers in Lebanon, mostly the Bekaa Valley, some in Beirut itself, and some closer to the border. About 1,600 targets were hit, and the casualty toll so far in Lebanon is about 615 killed and about 2,000 wounded. They went in primarily for the rocket launcher sites, the missile storage sites. Their aim was to preempt any projected Hezbollah attack with barrage with rockets and missiles onto Israeli territory. The aim was to preempt, hit them before they did it, because they had learned their lesson from the 7th October that they can't wait for this strike to happen and then retaliate. So they had preempted. They had preempted first with an intelligence operation, like I said, the pager strike, the walkie-talkie strike, to if for nothing, if it didn't eliminate the command and control network, it shook them up. It shook the Hezbollah up, took them by complete surprise. And this was followed up by the massive airstrikes, right? Massive airstrikes. And Alistair once again says that the Israelis have photo mapped the entire Bekaa Valley, the entire border areas, and they had then used artificial intelligence to try and pinpoint the rocket launch sites, the cruise missile sites, the tactical ballistic missile launcher sites, etc. And these, they had used AI to try and identify these, and if under forest cover you could not identify from the pattern of movement that was noticed there, they tried to identify a whole lot of cruise missile sites, rocket launcher sites, ballistic missile firing sites, right? And they claim to have inflicted enormous amount of attrition on them. In the attack on Beirut, the top commander, Ibrahim, who was the rocket force commander of the Hezbollah, He was killed in Lebanon in one of the buildings. He was hiding in the basement. The building was brought down. So this was a serious command and control, strike. And there was another commander, another Ismail, who was also killed in these command and control centric operations to hit the command and control arrangements of the Hezbollah. And Israel claims, and not without factual support, that this preempted the Hezbollah strike. Hezbollah was hit so hard that it is still reeling from these strikes. It is still reeling from the strikes, that it is pleading with Iran to intervene, and the Iranian president has in the UN General Assembly said, Israel is trying to provoke us, but we won't get provoked into its trap of doing this. So quite obviously Iran, for the time being, mark my words, has decided not to come in. They said we'll have to wait for the opportune time or the circumstances to be right. And in the meantime, American media is full of reports that how this devastating intelligence operational strike with the pagers, with the walkie-talkies, followed by the massive airstrikes, have rendered the Hezbollah almost kaput. That is what the claims are. Military experts like Allen, however, are sounding a note of caution. They are saying most of the missiles, the precision-guided missiles, firstly, none of them has been used as yet. In the Hezbollah retaliation, right? And their precision-guided tactical ballistic missiles, medium-range missiles, they have been stationed in deep tunnels. They can be in the hills. They can be fired from the tunnels and straight onto the target, and any amount of airstrikes cannot ensure that almost all of these are destroyed, rendered kaput and neutralized, right? So he said that in 2006 also Israel had a similar mapping exercise, but that had failed to destroy all Hezbollah targets. The Hezbollah, quite obviously, as was expected, had no option but to retaliate. We were expecting that Hezbollah would go in for massive retaliation with 1,500 to 2,000 rockets a day. One was surprised to find that the Hezbollah's response was rather, restrained. 200 to 300 rockets a day was their response. Of course, they struck about 8 targets in Israel, which included the Ramon Air Base, which removed the Ramon Air Base, which is the home of the 101, 105, 106 Israeli squadrons of F-16s, which had been carrying out the bulk of these airstrikes into Lebanon. So they tried to hit this base. They then tried to hit a ammunition factory 60 kilometers inside. They hit targets close to the northern command headquarters of Israel in northern part of Israel, and most of these Israel claims were intercepted by the Iron Dome, the other anti-ballistic missile sources that they have, Green Arrows, Patriots, etc. Now, then in a very calibrated manner, the Hezbollah has escalated now to the use of ballistic missiles. The Hezbollah also tried to hit the headquarters of the Rafale defense industries of Israel near Haifa. It tried to also hit Haifa. Haifa, we all must understand, is the crucial entry port from where food supplies and a lot of your trade, etc., your component parts come in from there. So these strikes were not very effective, but then Hezbollah escalated. It escalated to the use of the Qadr-1, medium range ballistic missile, which has a range of 2,000 kilometers and carries a massive warhead of 800 kilograms. This was fired on Tel Aviv and the Hezbollah claimed they had hit the headquarters of the Mossad in Tel Aviv. Israel, of course, has denied, but Israel has also imposed a total information ban in its territory, especially those bordering Lebanon, those which are within the range of the Hezbollah. This was the deepest target struck by the Hezbollah in Israel so far, 60 miles inside Israel, and at first time Tel Aviv itself was targeted. It was not an indiscriminate strike. It was not directed at the civilian population. For their propaganda stance, Iran and Hezbollah and all the ring of fire elements have been claiming that all their strikes on Israel are on purely military intelligence kind of targets, right? And they are not targeting indiscriminately the Israeli population. This gives them the propaganda advantage, the narrative, war of narratives advantage, so that they can tell the Western press and the rest of the world that look, whereas they are targeting civilian infrastructure, we are only going in for military targets and military infrastructure in Israel. Be that as it may, Israel claims that almost all of these are being intercepted. The missile they claim was intercepted. The Houthis had also fired a hypersonic missile. How it had gotten there is a major mystery, how it had reached Yemen. But the fact is they fired, and in about 11 minutes this one hypersonic missile had hit Israel. Israel claims they managed to shoot it down, but the video recordings there show a huge crater, of this. What damage it really caused is not really known. Now Israel has imposed a full-scale media ban on coverage of the impact of these missiles. Quite obviously they don't want to give the propaganda advantage to these, but the fact is that some of these missiles are getting through. The Israeli settlers in that area, they have uploaded videos of explosions, major explosions, and to some extent damage. So Alistair Crook and all the other military analysts feel that Hezbollah is not as badly hit as Israel claims, and as the Western media has been cheerleading, that Hezbollah is hors de combat, it is kaput, it is pleading to Israel to extricate it from the mess it has gotten into. But military experts, we must be balanced and judicious in our view, objective in our assessments. Military experts like Alistair Crook feel that it's not so, and Hezbollah still packs a punch. How many of their 150,000 rockets they'll fire in the days to come remains to be seen. There seems to be a bit of hesitancy on the part of Hezbollah, on the part of Iran. They feel time is on their side. Israelis have been fighting for almost a year now. The Israeli defense forces are tired, and if this war continues, their fatigue factor is likely to increase. What is the stamina of the Israeli people to live under this kind of continuous bombardment, threat of attack? 2 million Israelis have to go into shelters and basements every time the sirens go off. All schools are shut. So therefore, it has to be judicious. The Americans are telling the Israelis, please hurry up. Our aircraft carriers have been on station for months. They also need to rest and refit, resupply, fresh stocks of ammunition, food rations, etc. So they can't be indefinitely kept on station, and Israel will have to wind up whatever it wants to do quickly. So what are the Israeli options, and where do we go from here? The simple fact is that if push comes to shove, Israel may be left with no option but to launch a ground offensive. It is loath to do that. The Americans are not very keen. They don't want an all-out war with Hezbollah. They don't want Iran to get dragged in. So nobody wants this war. But despite that, it could well happen. Because if the Hezbollah attacks do not stop, just censoring them from the news is not adequate. Israel will have to, it has no option. Israel has to protect its population, it has to protect its people. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said so in no uncertain terms. We will have to create conditions for the 60 to 70,000 Israeli citizens to go back to their homes and earths in northern Israel, period. Daniel Hagari, the military spokesman, Admiral Daniel Hagari, military spokesman of Israel, had said they want to keep it a short campaign, but they are prepared to go for a long campaign if required. For the time being, they have ruled out a ground invasion, but if it is needed, they haven't ruled it out altogether. That is how things stand. So one estimate is that Israel may not launch a full-scale ground invasion a la 1982 with the Merkavas and this thing, trundling up to the Litani River. They will get there, but it will be an extremely costly and hard-fought battle. And though Israel has shown the capability to absorb casualties, it has been, with a small population, a country that is sensitive to casualties. But the Israeli population know it's a matter of life and death, and they are prepared to make all the sacrifices that are needed, because if they have to exist, I'm afraid they have to win. They have no option but to win and triumph. And Israel has clearly shown that it is not a military power to be trifled with. It still remains the dominant military power in the Middle East, and especially with the support and backing of the United States. So Israel could go in for small strikes first. I would reckon they'll go in for major kind of raids to take out key targets and make a big thing out of them. Aim would be to force Hezbollah to accept a ceasefire. Aim would be to put pressure on Lebanon, to put pressure on the Hezbollah, and to create a kind of a situation where you escalate to de-escalate, the rest of the world gets worried. President Joe Biden, in his farewell address to the UN General Assembly, also said an all-out war could happen in the Middle East, and he'd asked all countries to try and intervene to stop that escalation. So if Israel could go in for shallow penetrations and initial selected target strikes rather than a whole hog invasion, but if that doesn't work, well, then Israel has no option but to go in the whole hog. They have to go in the whole hog. As a military man, I understand, because they have to protect their people. They can't leave it onto the good faith of negotiations, etc., with the kind of enemies who are so implacable. The ring of fire around them is a serious threat to Israel, and this had especially been created very intelligently by the Iranians to not get directly militarily involved with Israel, but to fight it by proxy. That is an intelligent strategy on the part of Iran. It has worked so far. How long it can continue to work remains to be seen. And will this situation escalate? If the Hezbollah comes under very serious pressure, will Iran calmly accept the destruction of one of its prime assets in that arc of resistance, in that ring of fire? It is a major asset for the Iranians, which they have built up since 1982. Will they calmly sit back and watch it being decimated, destroyed? And especially now there are reports that the Hezbollah has been asking for assistance. There is the contra indications from military experts who know that area that it may be premature to count the Hezbollah out. It may be premature to count the Hezbollah out, and therefore all that points towards escalation in the Middle East that nobody wants. And it will have to be seen what role do Russia and China play in this conflict. Will Russia like to fan the fires in retaliation for the threats being held out to the Russians that British Storm Shadow missiles, French Spice missiles, cruise missiles will be used against Moscow and targets deep in Russia will strike Russian cities. Russia has threatened the United States that if you do this to us, we guarantee you now, this is what Putin has threatened, that we will hit back with, Iskandars, will hit back with long-range ballistic missiles armed with conventional warheads on European cities and, if needed, on American cities to deter you from this kind of adventurism. And when this was told to President Joe Biden, he was in a meeting with Prime Minister Stramer, who had come armed with maps, to plan strikes on cruise missile strikes on Russian cities, Moscow et al. And for the first time we found President Biden visibly angry and shouting. And he absolutely has ruled out this, because so far the Ukraine war was being managed mostly by the CIA and the American State Department, Antony Blinken. Now they are out of it because of the serious threat of escalation. The Pentagon has been asked to step in, and hereinafter it is the Pentagon which will be the dominant or the lead agency in conducting the war in Ukraine, where they seem to be taking a battering. So quite obviously the Americans and the others are not keen that the Middle East conflict escalate beyond the point. They are asking Israel to hurry up, and Israel is also trying to finish it by a combination of intelligence operations and air power. Whether it will work fully to sanitize the area of northern Israel to a point that the refugees can go back remains to be seen. It is a dangerous escalatory spiral that we see building up in the Middle East. Thank you.